You're listening to Therapy for Your Money, a podcast about all things money and finance for therapy practice owners. If you want to feel confident and in control of your financial life, then you've come to the right spot. I'm your host, Julie Herres. I'm an accountant and the owner of Green Oak Accounting. My firm specializes in working with private practices across the U.S., and my team and I have worked with hundreds of private practice owners. I'm on a mission to share all the best practices I've learned along the way because I want you to have a profitable private practice. My new book, Profit First for Therapists, is available at most online retailers. You can get it in paperback, audiobook, or ebook as well. Go check it out. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Therapy for Your Money. Today we have a special episode. This is our quarterly recap episode where we chat with Jacquie Carter from the team at Green Oak Accounting. Jackie's one of our beloved accounting managers, and she has the honor of meeting with a whole lot of our clients at the end of each quarter. And then typically we do a debrief after that, right, Jacquie, where we look at, okay, what happened? What's the mood? What is on people's minds? Because I think it can be a lot of value to our listeners. So, hi, Jacquie, welcome back.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Good to have you as always. So let's dive right in. What are you seeing as we round out September?
Yeah, so I know, if you've listened to our prior podcast, we try to talk through kind of what we're seeing, and it kind of feels a little more grim this time around. And so we don't want to have people sit and just stew in that worrisome spot. And I feel like we've seen a lot of those emotions this past quarter. A lot of worrisome thoughts, worrisome feelings, kind of being scared continually about the future. Some of the things that we've noticed were intakes continue to be down. We are finally starting to see some increases mid-August, not necessarily back to the way they were, but we're still seeing some increases. And just the reality of this summer being extremely hard on most practices. And we just kind of want to put out there, like normal, we want to make sure that you're planning for a similar downturn in November and December. And I know that's what we've kind of talked about in our meetings with my team. Just really making sure that you're planning ahead for those times that that cash flow is going to dip down a little bit.
Yeah, and Jacquie, this was such a funky year too, right? Because we had Change Healthcare in Q1. So difficult, devastating, I would even say, for some practices. And then as things are finally starting to get better and money's coming through, then the summer slump seemed to take a lot of practice owners by surprise this year, even though most years have a summer slump, right? With maybe the exception of 2020, a lot of folks really didn't have a chance to recover from Change Healthcare before that summer slump.
Right.
And now it's getting a little bit better, but it's been a weird year.
It has. And, one of the things we've noticed between this year and last is that, if you're an insurance practice, you're used to seeing January be slow with paying. We're seeing the same thing in June. For whatever reason, their claims were coming in okay. And then June hit, and then the delay in payments were stretching longer and longer and longer. And so I think, kind of moving forward, looking at June as one of those months to prepare, kind of like you do in January. That intakes are going to be down. People are going to be on vacation. Appointments are going to be down, and insurance can tend to take a little bit longer to pay in the summer. So
here's my suspicion. I don't actually know if this is true, but I suspect that a lot of insurance companies have a June 30th fiscal year end.
Yeah.
And so that they possibly hold back payments, which is not fair, not reasonable. They should not be doing that because their year is about to end. And so they want to artificially boost up profits by holding off. That is my suspicion. I don't know if it's actually true, but I've long suspected that. So
that's fair. And I think the biggest thing that practice owners can do is just know that could potentially happen and plan for that by trying to just keep that savings account bolstered in the times that you're doing well. And then in those times that it's going to be a little bit slower, even if it ends up not being as slow as you thought, you still have that buffer there for the future, which is always important.
How are private pay practices doing?
I think for the first time, we're seeing private pay practices really struggle more than ever. So a couple of years ago, there was a big push to try to get out of insurance and into private pay because they seem to weather the storms a little bit better. This year, with the economy being what it is, people are more likely going to go put food on their table versus go do the extra things like the vacations or the therapy or things like that. Their people are just not spending money. And so I think for one of the first years ever, private pay practices have been seeing more of a struggle. And then we've seen several try to get paneled again, or testing out one or two insurance
Okay.
companies to see how that works and to see if that's going to help bring in some additional money
Yeah.
through the end of the year.
And the election is probably not playing in our favor in this case as well, right? There's an election year, um, generally spending slows down for a little while, right? Just for uncertainty, what is going to happen? So people just tend to be a little bit more cautious. So discretionary spending always tends to slow down in an election year, which it's only every 4 years. So we kind of forget in between sometimes, right?
We do. Yep. I think that's playing into it a lot.
Tell me about hiring. What's going on over there?
Well, it's been extremely difficult and there's kind of a mixed bag of things. So,
Yeah.
because we work with both solo and group practices, we do see both sides of kind of a trend that's been happening. So, if you're a group practice, you've likely noticed some of your people are saying, hey, I can make more money on my own if I go out on my own. So, I'm going to just strike it out and start my solo practice, whether they have the intention to turn into a group practice themselves or just stay a solo practice. Then we also see the other side of that where they're like, hey, we want to strike out on our own. We need help. We need advice to get going, which absolutely, it's not an easy thing to start your own practice. It's not comfortable in the least. And so we've seen a little bit of kind of strife on both sides of this. And because we're kind of in that unique position to see what's happening, we've seen it be very, very difficult for both
On
sides.
both sides.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
we have.
And Jackie, before we started recording, and you mentioned to me, right, we've got this push pull because we see both sides and we care about both sides, right? If your heart is into starting your own solo practice, we want to support you in that. And if you want to have a group practice, we want to support you in that, right? Like there's good there both sides are great options. But where we want to bridge the gap of reality today because it seems there's sometimes unrealistic expectations on both sides. Would you agree? So we
I
say this with
agree.
all respect, with full respect, right? We're not saying we like group practice is better or solo practice is better. That's not the case.
Right.
But there's a push pull between the two that we're going to try to gently address here. So,
Right.
so what are you seeing? Like lots of turnover, right? When it comes to group practices. And what else?
Right. So looking kind of at when you're hiring, recently graduated therapists, we've heard from a lot of people that it's more difficult for them to work the 25 sessions per week. And it's kind of, been a trend where we're starting to see a lot of struggle with practice owners that have groups that, people wanting to work the 25 sessions a week and saying that's too difficult as a full-time person. Where in the past, that's been kind of the expected full-time caseload. And so there's a lot of struggle with practice owners saying, hey, I don't know how to get my people to the capacity that I need them to in order to make the money. And it's not that, you know, people that are employees of a company, they see, okay, here's the reimbursement rate that I'm getting in. Why am I only getting paid a portion of this? They're assuming largely, from what we kind of can tell, that the owner is taking the other half of that and running away and saying,
Yes.
it's my money. No.
And like it's really not
Yeah.
sailing away on their yacht, right?
Right.
Being the
Right.
business owner is just pocketing all of it. And so what I'm hearing you say, they're not sometimes a lot of times the clinicians are not realizing like just how much effort and expense goes into running a group practice, right? And any group practice owners listening, they know that. Obviously they know. right? The billing, the intake, the marketing, the administrative work, the software for everyone, the insurance. Like there's so many expenses that come with a group practice, and just keeping the doors open. But yeah, so clinicians are not necessarily seeing that reality. Where are you seeing folks want to be from a session standpoint?
We've been seeing kind of a push to like 15 to 20 is sort of where that comfortable spot is, it
Well,
seems for a lot of people. And that's just too low for a
yeah,
group practice. Not sustainable.
yeah. And what we often say, I know like Green Oak Accounting is that really 10 sessions per week tends to be a break even point, right? So if you're hiring someone to see 10 clients per week, the group practice is making $0. You're barely covering the expenses related to that team member, paying the team member, right? And the expenses related to that, like the marketing to bring enough intakes, the overhead, right? All of those things. So there's profit of $0, right? So you're hiring someone 10 hours, 10 sessions a week, zero additional dollars to the bottom line. Um, that's it. So 15, I mean, it's just barely above that, let alone being able to add benefits like health insurance. There is no room to do that. But what about the expectation on the clinician side? Because that's changing too, right? So the clinician is coming in wanting to work 15 to 20 sessions a week and get paid how much, Jackie?
Too much. So there's, it's looking at like, we hear this a lot where it's like, how can this practice pay 70, 80%, and then this practice is only offering 50 to 60?
Yeah.
A lot of times the expectations for that practice where you're seeing, where you're receiving 78%, it's not a sustainable mark for you either, because a lot of times that comes with, here, we want you to see 30 sessions. It's not sustainable. Chances are there is going to be some kind of drawback to you at some point in those practices, because it's not going to be a healthy work-life balance, all of those things that kind of go together. We've been seeing that too.
Yeah.
And so I think it starts to wear on both the practice owner and the employee, where you're like, okay, I can't keep doing this, but where am I seeing this? And a lot of our practice owners come to us and tell us, we want to give raises, we want to
Yeah.
give benefits, but we can't afford it. And a lot of them behind the scenes may not be even taking a payroll. So as an employee of a group practice, you need to be aware of that too. A lot of times you think that they're taking that extra, but it's not. It's going to run the practice, and they
Yeah.
sometimes aren't even taking money themselves out of it. And either way, neither one of those sides is a sustainable place to be.
Yeah. And I mean, Jackie and I are accountants, right? That's what we do at Green Oak. And so our role really as the accountant is to ensure the survival of the practice, right? That's the number one goal. There has to be, of course, compliance and all the other things, but there has to be enough money in the practice that it survives.
Right.
Because then it serves everyone else, the owner, the clinicians, everyone who's employed, the community, the clients. And so when we say, it's not that I don't think clinicians are worth $100,000 a year. I absolutely do think they are, right? I think their work is meaningful. It is important. But the mathematical reality of this industry is that in most cases, insurance reimbursements are somewhere between $100 to $125 per sessions. And so the math has to math ultimately. If a clinician is seeing 15 clients a week, that doesn't add up. They're not even generating 100,000 in revenue for the practice. And so they can't be paid that much, right? Like it just doesn't work. There's not this magical pile of money that their salary can come out of. The math has to add up in a business. Um, and so, Jackie, we have this unique perspective because we also see a lot of solo practice owners in brand new baby practices. And our role is also to support them in that, right? And one of the things that has been surprising to me this year is just how often our new clients that are just starting their practice are kind of shocked that they don't actually get to keep their full fee in solo practice. Right. And that's exactly why we do episodes like this so that everyone has access to information and just can see kind of behind the curtain of a practice. But in a solo practice, you still don't get to keep your full fee. Do you want to talk through that a little bit?
Yeah. And so a lot of times what we see is, people starting out on their own, and which is uncomfortable. It is difficult. It is
It's
not,
hard.
it is. And it's not that you're going to leave this group practice and then all of a sudden keep your full fee and be able to then be doing a little bit better than you were. In some cases, you might, just because, it might not have been a good fit or whatever. It might have been your dream. That's absolutely fine. But part of our job, like Julie was just saying, is that we have to tell you the uncomfortable truth of the situation sometimes too. Because just like the group practice, who we help to try to be sustainable and, have the practice survive, we will also do that for the solo practices too.
Absolutely.
And some of those conversations are really uncomfortable and really difficult. And sometimes it takes a mental shift from that practice owner, the new, baby practice owner.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of shifting to think, okay, well, now all of a sudden, this practice is my responsibility, whether or not you want to stay a solo or you do want to eventually hire. Because we work with both, where we can say, okay, solidly, you're a solo practice. This is what you're going to need to do in order to make the money that you want to make. And sometimes it's not possible just being a solo. Sometimes you have to look into the potential of bringing in a couple of additional people for you to get to the revenue that you want to see. Because if you're just starting out as a solo, you're not going to be able to keep your caseload between 10 to 15. A lot of times that has to double for you to even get that solo practice off the ground.
Yeah.
And so some of those numbers are kind of shocking to people when they first start out. They're like, I'm splitting from this group. I want to try this on my own. It is going to be uncomfortable. I think that's the biggest word of
Yeah.
the day today when I think about it. It's just, it's going to be hard. But you can do it and it's possible. It's just maybe shifting some of that expectation that you had about what that
Mhm.
actually looks like for this new practice that you just started.
And Jackie, to your point, I think that big shift is not just I am a therapist who is now directly seeing clients instead of doing it under the umbrella of a group, right? Like you are now a business owner. And so sometimes
Right.
you have to put on your business owner hat and do business owner things. And so while you may get to keep more of your fee, right? That is absolutely possible. You're doing a lot of unpaid work. There's a lot of unpaid hours doing marketing and billing and intake and answering the phone and returning email. Like there's just a lot of those things that are unpaid, unnoticed, unseen that have to happen to get that practice off the ground. There's also a lot of expenses that tend to be surprising, right? We sometimes see new practice owners agonizing over, should I spend $30 a month on psychology today? Well, I mean, maybe, maybe not, right? That's ultimately a decision for you to make. But in the grand scheme of being a business owner, a $30 a month decision, that's almost inconsequential, right? In the grand scheme of being a business owner, like you're going to have to make those decisions every single day. So it's kind of a surprise sometimes just how many decisions you have to make all the time to get that practice off the ground. It can be surprising too how challenging it is to find new clients. And sometimes your clients will follow you, right? And give you a good baseline of clients. But then you still, even if that happens, right, at some point, those clients will terminate because it's the natural end of their therapy cycle with you. And you have to have processes in place to attract and onboard new clients in order for the practice to be sustainable long term. And that's harder to feel and it's harder to do than it sounds sometimes.
It is. One of the things that we talk about in our meetings with our team is, you know, some of these conversations are difficult to have, but part of
Yeah.
our job is to not, for lack of a better term, fluff your feathers, but we try to say this stuff in love because we
Yeah.
really do want you to succeed. Like our success is based on your success too,
Yeah.
because we are looking at your numbers, and it's not just saying, okay, the math isn't mathing, this isn't going to work. Like we're trying to give you really actionable items that you can do and ways to move forward where this works and where it's sustainable and where your practice can be profitable and support you. So all we've said a lot of things today, kind of both sides, but no matter what size of group practice you have, what solo practice or starter, start up, whatever it is, we absolutely try to not just sit in the hard with you like we do, but we also want you to get out of that difficulty and we want you to succeed and be sustainable. So that's why we're saying some of the things that we're saying, which can
Yes.
also be a little hard to hear. But yeah, we do it out
Yeah.
of caring for sure.
I love that, because Jackie, you are always very firm, right? You are very clear, and yet you are always kind, and that's one of the things that I know your clients love you for, where they know exactly where they stand and where their business is. You're not going to skirt around the difficult
Right.
topic.
Yeah.
Before we go today, there's two things I want to cover. One is something I've heard multiple times in the last couple of months. Uh, someone that I've heard someone say, "Oh, I'm gonna start a group practice because I want passive income." And when I hear that, the alarm bells go off in my head. I'm like, alert, alert. There's nothing passive about group practice ownership, right? Like that maybe someday down the line when the practice is making so much money, you can afford to replace yourself as CEO. But man, is it hard work to get a group practice off the ground. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. And that's kind of ties into where we're talking about all of the time and effort put into things. And a lot of times, if it's struggling, the practice owner's not even making money. So there's so many things that go into running a group practice between what you're paying and payroll, all of the different expenses that need to be intentional before you can even look at being, you know, out of the practice and letting it just run itself. It takes a very long time, and there's going to be a lot of work that goes into that could be unpaid as the owner. Absolutely.
And it's absolutely worth it, right? We see group practices do very well and they can be very profitable, right? So all of those things are possible. So we're not saying don't do it. We're saying if you're going to do it, just go in with a clear head, knowing it's going to be a lot of work to get there, right? It's a long mountain to climb before you get to the top. Plant your flag and say like, okay, I'm removing myself from the practice. Absolutely possible, but not a day one situation. Also, on day one of hiring a clinician, you're not all of a sudden going to zero clients, right? One part time clinician seeing a couple clients a week cannot sustain to them and you in the practice. So you're going to have to keep seeing clients for quite some time typically. But you'll be able to scale back, but there seems to be this somewhat unreasonable expectation sometimes of what group practice ownership is going to look like and how fast that's going to be possible. Yeah.
Right.
Um last but not least, what kind of advice do you have for practice owners as we head into the end of the year?
Mhm. So typically, this is the season where things start to ramp back up a little bit. Kids go back to school, life kind of goes back to normal. The summer is over, unfortunately. And you start seeing things pick back up a little bit. So keeping in mind, this is the time when you do see that pick back up and you start having a little extra. It's always a good idea to put a little bit aside for those times, whether it's the holiday season coming up, whether it's the spring break in 2025, summer 2025. It's never too soon to just start putting some aside. And if you're telling yourself, oh, well, I can't afford to put more than like $10 to $15 aside, that's okay. Do that. Do what you can. You don't, we hear a lot of times, well, like, is it a good time to start either profit first, or is it a good time to start an emergency payroll account, or, whatever that looks like for you? You can start it whenever you want to. And today is the best day to start. Whether it's $1, $10, $100, 1,000, whatever that looks like for you in your practice, just to start that savings account doesn't take anything but just a little time, effort to get that set up. And I think the practice owners that have saved aside even a small emergency buffer are doing a little bit better in the times where the cash dips. Um, Obviously, try not to dip into it if you don't need to, even if it's just a savings account or a line of credit, something like that. But it's been very, very beneficial in years like this where it's just been such a difficult several months in a row. So I definitely think that's a good idea. Start today, even if it's $5, throw that aside, get into the habit of just putting a little bit extra aside for you. And I think that's going to be kind of a good thing to start looking forward to towards the end of the year, especially when we know things can kind of slow down a little bit.
Yeah. You mentioned in passing an LOC, so line of credit. I want to just circle back to that. The best time to get a line of credit is when you don't need it, right? If you need the cash like tomorrow to make payroll, there is not a bank around that's going to be able to process a line of credit that fast. So you're going to be forced to rely on what I call the payday lender of small business. And so while things are going well, while things are under control, when you have a couple of steady months, this is a great time to start working with your bank on getting that line of credit. It typically takes a couple of weeks for them to even approve it, right? You're gonna have to give them a whole lot of information, tax returns, a whole lot of stuff. But while things are going well, it's a good time to request that line of credit so that you have that backup. And we always hope that you don't have to use it, right? That's kind of, I would prefer that you never have to use it, but I like it as a safety blanket over there, hanging out. It's worth the $250, $500 a year that it costs you to have it because it provides you basically insurance, right? You are insuring yourself. And if you need it, it's going to be there. It's again, we're going back to where we started. Make sure that the business survives, right? We're always looking at how do we keep the business alive? And that's one of them. If you run out of cash and you can't pay your clinicians, the business is going down really, really quickly. Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, on that note, thank you, Jacquie. It's so good to chat with you once a quarter. We'll see you again towards the end of the year.
Sounds good. All right.
The information contained in this podcast represents the host and guest's general opinions and should not be construed as personalized accounting and tax advice. Listeners should consider all facts and circumstances before applying this information and seek appropriate advice from an accountant, financial planner, lawyer, or other professional. Any info provided does not constitute accounting, tax, or legal advice.